Hi, my name is Veronica, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation. How did that one do?
That was very good. Do it just maybe one or two more, okay? Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Gary Russell strikes back on social media. It's been a whole week. We haven't heard from Gary Russell in a week. He stopped doing interviews. He stopped posting on Instagram, talking about fighting Devin Haney. He just went completely silent for a whole week. The very last time that Gary Russell was talking on the internet before he went silent is when he was online, on camera, talking to Bill Haney. Bill Haney had asked him, he said, "Didn't we give you everything you wanted in the contract?" And Gary, he said, "No, you didn't." So Bill said, "What is it you wanted that you didn't get?" And Gary Russell, he left the chat and he never came back, and he had been missing for a whole week ever since. But he finally broke his silence. I'm gonna go ahead and play exactly what Gary Russell had to say, explaining why he dipped out for a week and didn't say anything, and then I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys my take. Check it out, guys.
I ain't been on this joint in a second, but I don't like giving people false information, or if I do come on here, I want to give them some good shit, you know, something of some substance. But to the people that's wondering, we definitely still trying to make this motherfucking fight happen with Devin Haney. We definitely still trying to make this fight happen. And to all these people that's talking about just sign the contract and fight back, this, that, and the third, y'all some dumb motherfuckers for saying some shit like that. Y'all don't know what's in the contract or whatever. I'm not somebody that just signs a piece of paper and none of the information is 100% correct and it's binding me to something that's not 100% legit. You know, it's a concept of business. You know, I am a fighter, but it's a concept of business first. Y'all need to understand that, to the stupid people out there. But we definitely try and make this motherfucker fight happen. You know, they talking about some fight him November 7th, this, that, and the third. The reason why this November 7th date is even a date that they put out there, because that was a date that they was already obligated to. Devin Haney was already in camp. He was already training. Even if me and Devin Haney wouldn't have had this conversation and got to talking, he would have been competing, fighting someone on November 7th, because that was the date that Matchroom and Dazn had available for him. You know, I'm definitely in the gym. I always stay in the gym. It's a way of life. It's a way of life for me. You know, even when I'm not getting ready for a fight, or even when I'm concluded my career, I'm still gonna be in the gym. But I'm not training as if I'm getting ready for a fight as of yet. A proper camp is 8 weeks. A proper camp is 8 weeks. You know what I'm saying? So all this talking, and then they trying to fake manipulate the fans and spin this shit. Like, stop this shit, man. Stop this shit. Y'all know what it is, man. We definitely trying to make the fight. You know, as of now, I hollered at Al. I'm a free agent, but me and Al, we still have a business relationship. So I hollered at Al, and I don't know for sure. You know, but I told him that this is a fight that I want to make happen. They not the Matchroom and Dazn isn't, you know, bagging them apparently, you know, because they only supporting that November 7th date. So shit, let's see what we can do. So it's a big possibility we might make something shake, man. You know, this fight is much bigger than what everybody's saying. So let's make something happen, because they doing a lot of talking.
Now, it's a lot of unpacking to do, a whole lot of unpacking to do. The first thing I want to mention is Gary Russell actually corrected a lot of you guys that were saying, oh, well, you know, this is the reason why he didn't agree to the fight, because Dazn didn't want to make the fight. Dazn didn't want to make the fight. Matchroom, they weren't on board. If you listen to what Gary Russell just said, he actually admitted that they were on board for the fight, but only for the November 7th date. So Gary Russell just said right there, it wasn't Dazn. The problem wasn't Dazn and Matchroom wasn't on the term sheet. He just admitted that they were on board for the fight, but for the November 7th date, which is a date that Gary Russell did not want to meet. He said he would not be ready for that date. So now we know without a doubt, Matchroom and Dazn, they were on board for the Gary Russell versus Devin Haney fight for November 7th. We also know by Gary Russell's own admission, because he said this countless times, Gary kept saying Devin really wants to fight. He kept saying this on his social media sites. Devin, he wants to fight. I know Devin wants to fight. And matter of fact, when they first sent the contract to him, I remember how he was talking about he was going to kick Devin Haney's ass. But at the same time, he said, man, I really commend Devin though. For him to be 21 years old and be the only person to come after me the way he is, I give him a lot of credit. So once again, by Gary's own admission, you put all the facts together of what Gary is saying directly. He's telling you that Devin Haney wanted the fight, Matchroom and Dazn wanted the fight for November 7th. The only person who did not want the fight was Gary Russell because he did not feel that was enough time for him to train properly for this fight. These are all the facts because this is what Gary Russell is saying, not what Bill Haney or Devin Haney is saying. This is coming straight from Gary Russell's mouth. Now you heard Gary say a proper training camp is 8 weeks. But the irony is it was actually Gary Russell that criticized Devin Haney for taking the Gamboa fight. He said that Devin Haney was taking Tank's leftovers and he was telling Devin to fight me. That's the whole reason why Devin Haney, he tried to push Gamboa to the side and go after the Gary Russell fight. So clearly you would think that when Gary Russell was saying, you know, what are you doing fighting this guy? Fight me. As he just said, he already knew that Devin Haney was going to be fighting November 7th, no matter who it was going to be against. He knew that. So what I don't understand is, if Gary Russell already knew about the November 7th date, from the first term sheet they sent out to him, why didn't Gary Russell say anything about that date then? It would seem that that would have been one of his main objections when it comes to this fight. But he didn't say anything about the date. He only had a problem with the stipulation of Gary Russell having to fight on Dazn a couple of times if he beats Devin Haney, right? That was the first offer sheet, the first term sheet that was sent to him when he said that. Then you guys know the story. I forgot to mention Gary Russell originally, he wanted $2 million. Now, and according to Bill Haney, originally before that, Gary was asking for way more money than that. He dropped it down to $2 million, and then because he had offered to fight Terrence Crawford for 1.5, which Gary did explain. He said, well, the reason why I did that because it was personal with Terrence Crawford. It's business with Devin Haney. So now let me get back to what Gary said at the beginning of the video. He said, for all y'all telling me just sign the contract, you know, don't worry about what's on it, just sign it. First of all, so there's no confusion, it wasn't a contract that was sent to Gary Russell. It was a term sheet. And with a term sheet, you send over the terms, and it's Gary Russell's job once he receives it to tell them what terms he agrees to. If he wants to make any changes, then he would send it back to them. He would make the changes. They go back and forth until they agree to all terms. That's why we always see these boxing headlines when two fighters are negotiating, you know, they say, oh, you know, both fighters have agreed to all terms. And that's always good news because that means the next step is there's going to be an announcement shortly following that, right? That's why they say that, because this term sheet gets passed back and forth until both fighters agree to all terms, okay? The reason why that was very important to note is because it wasn't a whole lot of people just telling Gary Russell to sign the contract because he didn't have a contract. A lot of people, they were saying, well, why don't you just make the changes on the term sheet and send it back to Devin Haney or Team Haney? Something else that really needs to be cleared up. The second term sheet that was sent to him when they, made the redactions by removing the stipulation of Gary Russell having to fight on Dazn if he beats Devin Haney. You guys remember that, right? You guys will probably also remember Devin Haney. He started doing some interviews where he explained we removed the stipulations. So now Gary Russell, he has everything he wanted. He has the 1.5 million. He has no obligation to fight on Dazn if he beats me. He said, so he should be agreeing to all of the terms. It doesn't take that long for him to sign the contract. I've already signed my part, so now he needs to sign his. It shouldn't take that long. This is what Devin Haney said. So we waited a couple days to see what Gary Russell was going to do. Gary, he finally responds and he says, I'm not signing this. And what he actually said to explain why, he said, this term sheet, it says, the terms of this fight will only be approved if Dazn and Matchroom are on board, meaning if they give the approval. This fight will only go down if Dazn and Matchroom gives the green light. Now, I want you guys to think about this for a second. Doesn't that sound more like that's actually in Gary Russell's best interest? That's actually protecting him as opposed to binding him to anything. They're basically giving him the heads up. They're telling Gary, if Matchroom and Dazn, if they don't approve this fight, then you have no obligation to take the fight. You're not binded to take the fight. It actually would have been worse if they would have sent him a term sheet where they didn't say that. But this term sheet is telling Gary Russell, if they don't give their stamp of approval for this fight, you can walk away, Gary. You lose nothing. You can walk away. And remember, this is only a term sheet. These are two fighters agreeing to all terms, so then the term sheet can be presented to Dazn. And then they can go ahead and give the final stamp of approval. But we've already heard Eddie Hearn, who's a partner with Dazn and works also with Devin Haney. He said it about a week ago. He said, we are targeting Gary Russell and Gamboa. One of those guys are going to be Devin Haney's next opponent. So getting back to what Gary Russell said in this piece, he also said, I'm not gonna just sign a contract. You guys don't even know what's in the contract. And he said, I'm definitely not gonna sign a contract when all the information in the contract is not correct. So now he's got me wondering, what information was incorrect? What was in there that we don't know about? Because Gary Russell, he's been extremely transparent when it comes to this whole situation. Soon as he's seen something he didn't want, he told the whole world, which was the stipulation. Soon as he's seen that in the contract, he told everybody about it. He said, look, now they're trying to hold my feet to the fire. They're telling me basically, if I beat them, then I got to fight a couple times on Dazn, and I don't want that, right? And then he explained how the term sheet clearly read, this fight will only happen if Dazn and Matchroom approves it. So he's been telling us everything. So I don't understand, what does he mean, unless he's gonna, break some news and go back on his Instagram or do an interview and tell somebody there's another reason why I decided that I didn't want to sign the contract. Because everything else he's already put out there. When he says the information is not correct, the only thing I can think of is him talking about the date. But like Gary Russell said, he had already knew that Devin Haney was going to fight on November 7th, regardless if it was against him, Gamboa, or someone else. So maybe the date wasn't the incorrect information that Gary Russell was talking about. But there was something positive that Gary Russell said in this piece. And that's when he said, this fight is bigger than you guys think. He said that he talked to Al Haymon and he told Al Haymon how bad he really wants this fight. He started to imply that maybe there's a chance that since Dazn was only approving the November 7th date for Haney versus Russell fight, he's saying that now Al Haymon may actually pick up the fight on perhaps PBC since they needed to be on a different date. And that's something that I was gonna say in this video anyway. I was gonna say, well, you know what? If Gary ends up fighting against Fortuna and Devin ends up fighting against Gamboa next, why don't they start negotiating right now for whatever date Gary Russell actually wants to fight once he gets past Fortuna? Doesn't that make sense, guys? I mean, I'm sure everyone who's disagreeing on this whole situation would even agree with that, right? Because although Gary Russell is telling you he's still trying to make this fight, he also admitted that he's not taking the fight on the date that they were negotiating the fight to be on since day one, since they've been going back and forth. So now we know it's out. It's not going to be Gary Russell fighting against Devin Haney November 7th. We know that for a fact now. So if that's the case, then they should start negotiating for, once again, whatever date that Gary Russell wants to fight on, they should start negotiating for the next fight after both fighters get past their next opponents. But see, what I'm still not understanding is, once again, Gary Russell, he was missing for a whole week. Bill Haney, he just said, in a recent interview with Aki, he said, man, I've been texting this man, I've been calling him. He has not replied to me at all. See, this is what I'm not understanding. Because for Gary Russell to come out and say something to the public, you would think that if he's willing to let the public know what's going on, he would want to let Team Haney know what's going on, probably before he even lets us know what's going on. Just like they know about the term sheets before the public does, right? The same thing applies in this situation. So it's great news that Gary Russell, he wants to give the public an update. But I cannot understand, why would he not be responding to Team Haney? These are the people that you're trying to make the fight with. I mean, even if Gary Russell, let's say he didn't want to talk to Bill Haney anymore, he doesn't have to talk to Bill. He could call up Eddie Hearn, or he could have his lawyers call up Bill Haney and Devin Haney's lawyers. I don't understand why Gary Russell would not keep the conversation going to making this fight possibly come to fruition. But once again, the only thing we know, after what Gary Russell said, Matchroom and Dazn, they actually approved the fight. Devin Haney wanted the fight. Gary Russell did not want the fight for November 7th. But I think that Gary Russell is starting to realize how important this fight is and how bad of a business move it would be for him to walk away from this fight. Because once again, I've already told you guys, Gary Russell, he's already been one of the most avoided fighters. So if he walks away from this Devin Haney fight, there's no telling how long it's going to take Gary Russell to get a marquee signature opponent in the ring. Hopefully negotiations continue and we'll get to see them fight against each other after their next opponents. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. Basically, you will end up with a haircut shape up or an edge up. What they do is they tattoo small dots that look like hair follicles in the areas where you have lost your hair and then blend it with your existing hair. You can even choose what type of hairline you want, hard shape up or soft and natural finish. And to maintain it, all you gotta do is shave your hair every few days, which is something you already were probably doing anyway. So if you wanna get this hookup for my brothers out there in the UK and Europe, make sure you check out the Scalp This on Instagram. And for my brothers out there in the States, make sure you go ahead and contact my man Scalp Carolinas on Instagram. And when you go on their pages, you can see for yourself what these guys look like before. I mean, these guys are literally hair magicians. I've never seen anything like this before, but all I can tell you guys is this is a serious game changer for us men. So make sure you get in contact with Scalp This and Scalp Carolinas on Instagram.